Welcome to Echo 315, Study Session 12, Leverage and Capital Structure. Introduction. The debt equity mix of a firm is called its capital structure. The capital structure decision is a significant financial decision since it affects the shareholders' return and risk, and consequently the market value of shares. Leverage is the portion of fixed costs that represent risk to the firm. In this study session, we will examine measures of leverages and relationship between capital structure and the value of firm. Learning outcomes. When you have studied this study session, you should be able to 1. Calculate break-even point, operating leverage, and financial leverage. 2. Discuss the approaches to the study of capital structure. Break-even point, operating leverage, and financial leverage. A discussion of break-even analysis is necessary for understanding the nature and importance of operating leverage. Break-even analysis. The break-even point is the level of sales at which no profit or loss results. To determine the break-even point, you must divide the cost into fixed and variable. Fixed costs are costs that are constant regardless of volume, while variable costs are costs that vary in direct proportion to a change in volume. At break-even point, sales revenue equals the total of variable costs plus fixed costs. The formula for calculating break-even point is as follows. Break-even sales in unit equals FC divided by P minus V, where FC equals fixed costs, P equals selling price per unit, V equals variable cost per unit. Management may want to know the cash break-even point, which is the volume of sales that will cover all cash expenses during the period. This is because part of the fixed costs used in the usual break-even point do not involve cash payment, e.g., depreciation. Cash break-even sales in unit will equal bracket FC minus D times P minus V in bracket, where D equals depreciation expenses. Operating leverage. A simple indication of operating leverage is the effect of a change in sales on operating income. Operating leverage at X unit of sales equals percentage change in EBIT divided by percentage change in sales. Financial leverage. A measure of financial leverage is the effect of the change in operating income on earnings per share. Financial leverage at X unit of sales equals percentage change in EPS divided by percentage change in EBIT. Total leverage. A measure of total leverage is the effect of change in sales on earnings per share. Total leverage at X unit of sales equals percentage change in EPS divided by percentage change in sales. Theory of capital structure. Capital structure is the long-term sources of funds used by the firm. The primary objective of capital structure decisions is to maximize the market value of the firm through an appropriate mix of long-term sources of fund. This mix, called the optimal capital structure, will maximize the firm's overall cost of capital. However, there are arguments about whether an optimal capital structure actually exists. The argument centers on where a firm can, in reality, affects its valuation and its cost of capital by varying the mixture of the fund used. There are four different approaches to the theory of capital structure. 1. Net operating income approach. 2. Net income approach. 3. Traditional approach. 4. Modigliani-Miller approach. The general assumption of the four approaches: 1. No income taxes. 2. 100% dividend payout. 3. No transaction cost. 4. Constant EBIT. 5. Constant operating cost. In each of the four approaches, the concept is with what happens to K when the degree of leverage increases, where K equals the yield on the firm's debt and KE equals the return on equity. Net operating income approach. This approach suggests that the firm's overall cost of capital, K0, and the value of the firm's market value of debt and stock outstanding are both independent of the degree to which the company uses leverage. The key specific assumption with this approach is that K0 is constant regardless of the degree of leverage. Since net operating income approach assumes that K0 remains constant regardless of the changes in leverage, the cost of capital cannot be altered through leverage. Hence, this approach suggests that there is no one optimal capital structure as shown in figure 12.1. Net income approach. This approach suggests that both the overall cost of capital K0 and the market value of the firm are affected by the firm's use of leverage. The specific assumption with this approach is that Ki and Ka remain unchanged as the leverage increases. The net income approach shows that the firm is able to increase its value and lower its cost of capital as it increases the degree of leverage. Under this approach, the optimal capital structure is found farthest to the right, as in figure 2. As a proportion of debt is increased in the capital structure, it causes weighted average cost of capital to decrease and approach the cost of debt. The firm will have the maximum value and the lowest cost of capital when it is almost all debt financed. Traditional approach. The traditional approach to valuation and leverage assumes that there is an optimal capital structure and that the firm can increase its value through leverage. This is a moderate view of the relationship between the leverage and the valuation that encompasses all the grounds between NOI approach and the NI approach. According to the traditional position, the manner in which the overall cost of capital reacts to changes in capital structure can be divided into three stages. In the first stage, the rate at which the shareholders capitalize their net income, the cost of equity remains constant or rises slightly with debt, but when it increases, it does not increase fast enough to offset the advantage of low cost debt. During this stage, the cost of debt remains constant or rising negligibly, since the market views the use of debt as a reasonable policy. As a result, the value of the firm increases and the overall cost of capital will fall with increasing leverage. Once the firm has reached a certain degree of leverage, increases in leverage have a negligible effect on the value of the firm and the overall cost of capital. This is because the increase in the cost of equity due to the added financial risk offsets the advantage of low cost debt. Within that range or at the specific point, the value of the firm will be at maximum and the cost of capital will be at minimum. Beyond the acceptable limit of leverage, the value of the firm decreases with leverage and the cost of capital increases with leverage. This happens because investors perceive a high degree of financial risk and demand a higher cost of equity to offset the advantage of low cost debt. The overall effect of these three stages is to suggest that the cost of capital is a function of leverage. It declines with leverage, reaches a minimum point or range, and then rises. The traditional view is shown in figure 3. Modigliani-Miller approach. Modigliani-Miller advocates that the relationship between leverage and valuation is explained by the NOI approach. They assume perfect capital market, homogeneous risk classes, no taxes, full payout, and that the risk of investors depend on the variability of the net operating income. Their argument can be explained in terms of Proposition 1 and 2. NLM Proposition 1. The Modigliani-Miller Proposition 1 argues that for firms in the same risk class, the total market values is independent of the debt equity mix and is given by capitalizing the expected net operating income by the rate appropriate to that risk class. It can be expressed as follows: value of the firm V equals market value of equity S plus market value of debt D. Thus K0 is expressed as the weighted average of the expected rate of return of equity debt capital of the firm. Since the cost of capital is defined as the expected operating income divided by the total market value of the firm, and since MLM concludes that the total market value of the firm is unaffected by the financing mix, it follows that the cost of capital is independent of the capital structure. The cost of capital function, as hypothesized by MLM through Proposition 1, is shown in figure 4 below. It is evident that the average cost of capital is a constant and is unaffected by leverage. Proposition 2. This follows from Proposition 1. The cost of equity formula can be derived from MLM's definition of the average cost of capital. NOR equals KES plus KID, which implies that E equals NOI minus KD divided by S. This equation states that for any firm in a given risk class, the cost of equity is equal to the constant average cost of capital plus a premium for the financial risk, which is equal to debt equity ratio times the spread between the constant average cost of capital and the cost of debt. Leverage will result not only in more earnings per share to shareholders, but also increased cost of equity. The benefit of leverage is exactly taken off by the increased cost of equity, and consequently, the firm's market value will remain unaffected. Summary: you have learned that capital structure is the debt equity mix of a firm. The method of break-even point is useful in calculating leverage. Operating leverage is measured by the effect of change in sales on operating income. Financial leverage is measured by the effect of change in operating income on earning per share. Total leverage is measured by the effect of change in sales on earning per share. There are different explanations on whether a firm can, in reality, affect its valuation and its cost of capital by varying the capital structure. The net operating income approach suggests that the firm's overall cost of capital and the value of the firm's market value of debt and stock outstanding are both independent of the degree to which the company uses leverage. The income approach suggests that both the overall cost of capital and the market value of the firm are affected by the firm's use of leverage. The traditional approach assumes that there is an optimal capital structure and that the firm can increase its value through leverage. This is the end of study session 12. Thanks for listening.